Hello, I'm Dalton Delan. I'm a columnist for the Berkshire Eagle, and this is Eagle Reels, where we take you beyond the news. My very special musical guest talent today is Will Hudgins, and he is a percussionist for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Welcome.
Thank you, Dalton.
Firstly, how is the summer going at Tanglewood?
I'll tell you, it's going quickly, as it tends to do every year. We're already in the 6th week out of 8 weeks that the orchestra is in residence. And it's just incredible to me to think that we're only 12 days away from finishing up here. It's crazy.
That's fantastic. Now, your days are amazingly busy because I know that on some days you go from playing with the BSO to playing in a jazz quintet with Michael Junkins. Is there cognitive dissonance to doing that?
That's funny. To my way of thinking, it's all music. Jazz is substantially a theoretical process as far as how you approach it, and so is clearly classical music as well. So it's just a matter of the application of how you put that theory into its process. So to me, it's all just sort of a musical journey.
Well, what about that shift, though, from the conducted precision of a classical orchestra to, at least, I don't know, whether all your jazz is free form, but, the space for improv in jazz aren't they challenging in very different ways?
I guess you could say that the jazz setting is one that's sort of a chaconne in that the chord system repeats itself over and over. So you'll play the melody and then the chords repeat themselves in that very strict form, which is something that may not be immediately recognizable, but it is. So that form of that song is going to remain the same, even through the drum solos, for instance, that's the particular part that might be hard to wrap your head around. But the amount of measures and the form of the tune remains the same throughout the entire song. So if it's typically a 32-bar form, that 32 bars will remain the same through every one solo. When it gets a little harder to wrap your head around is when that form is not 32 bars. Maybe it's a 20-bar form. Maybe it's a 24-bar form. 12-bar blues is extremely typical. But when those songs start and the melody is played, they remain the same throughout.
I think people don't actually recognize how close mathematics and music are.
It sort of is. It's crucial as far as keeping the band in the same place in the song. And so throughout everyone's solos, but even throughout the bass solo, and particularly the drum solos, that form remains the same. Otherwise, we wouldn't know where we were.
The drummer is the timekeeper, right? The drummer is really that's the backbone, is it not?
I would agree with that. That it's been said that every band's only as good as its drummer, and that's true. If you're putting a lot of faith and trust in that particular chair, and also the timpanist in the orchestra is frequently referred to as the drummer of the orchestra, because you can do a lot of damage if you're not having a good day.
Well, I know you're a great percussionist, but let's put it this way: the rare time you make a mistake, Do you feel all ears on you, or is it a supportive place where you just move on?
So you have to realize that you're not mechanical, and these things do happen. However, in an orchestra like the BSO, you really want to keep that to a minimum because there's so few errors going on that they do tend to stand out. Um, and of course, in my chair, I compare my job to the say the violinists who are playing an enormous amount of notes, and it's mind-boggling how they do that. We play much fewer notes. However, our notes are conspicuous, so our margin for error is is very small.
Well, now, Rachel Fagerberg, your wife, she's one of those who plays a lot of notes. She's also in the BSO. Do you guys compare notes after each performance?
You know, it's funny because we both are in the orchestra. However, our jobs are extremely different, and it's just insane how much work. We just played film night 2 nights in a row, for instance, and John Williams's compositions are just incredibly full of playing for violins, violas, cellos, all the string players. Mind-boggling how they managed to walk through that minefield and produce what they do. It's just crazy.
Well, did you guys meet? Did you and Rachel meet in the orchestra?
We did indeed. She started in the BSO in 1989, and I started the next season, and we met at that time. Yeah.
You had come from Florida. Were you happy to come back north to New England weather, or did you miss any of that Florida heat and humidity?
Right. I had gone to school. I originally from Texas. I'd gone to school in Baltimore and in Philadelphia. And you're right, my first job was in Orlando, and I was there for 8 years. And it was a great place to spend your 20s. Um, and but being in the Boston Symphony is the dream of every orchestral player, and so I was extremely excited. I knew um, what was in store for me in January, February, and March, but nothing's perfect.
Well, in terms of the BSO, I mean, you have played uh, obviously with great orchestras, but with some incredible famous conductors. Any particular stories you can share?
Well, yeah, off the top of my head, it's been quite some time now, but Seiji Ozawa was unlike any human being I've ever known or seen work and operate. Just freakishly gifted, um, both musically, but of course, musically and of course, physically, uh, as far as being able to telegraph to musicians, to the orchestra, what it was that he was looking for, how he wanted to interpret um, pieces of music. But um, the thing that everyone always mentions is his memory, which was uh, just non-human. Um, he would learn pieces and learn scores at a you just couldn't understand how he could store all that information in his mind. It's just crazy. Um, so I do distinctly remember once when he was doing a Mahler symphony at Tanglewood, surrounded by conducting the fellows and doing an opera, and just with this enormous amount of responsibility that he had. And we were doing a Mahler symphony, and I had this chime part that it was not really notated. It just says start here it's supposed to be in the distance, sort of a sound effect. And in the rehearsal, in the first rehearsal of 2 rehearsals, I had to stand up on these steps because the chimes were really high and they were large. And so I was going to the chimes and I stood up on the steps, and in walking to there, I got a little bit confused as to when I was supposed to start. So I started, and then I realized that's not right. That's early. So I stopped, and then I started again at the right place, and I looked up, and Seiji was facing the other way. He was conducting the basses. And so I thought to myself, okay, I got away with that little mistake. And then 2 days later, we were in the dress rehearsal. And so I went up my stairs. I knew where I was supposed to come in this time. And I looked over, and Seiji was again, he was facing the basses and conducting over here. And he took his left hand and he went like this, not yet. And then he went like that and pointed at me. And I said, dadgummit, I didn't get away with that. He heard that. And it was just crazy amidst this enormous amount of material that he had in his brain. So there you go. That's a story about Seiji. Since we're honoring him at TOP today, I thought maybe that would be an appropriate one.
What a wonderful story. That's really incredible. Look, that speaks to obviously the brain power, but the focus and the preparation. I was privileged as a boy to grow up next door and as a classmate with Yo-Yo Ma. And one thing I remember, in addition to what a wonderful human he was, even as a boy, he practiced all afternoon, every afternoon. That dedication, that amount of work. Does that speak to you? What was your upbringing musically?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that Yo-Yo practiced every day, because it wouldn't be fair if he didn't. So that's good to hear. My upbringing was, I would say, more normal than playing a cello for 4 hours every day when you're 13 years old. My interests were widespread. When I was 12, I wasn't sure where my career path was, which I think is a little bit different than a lot of my colleagues. I think for instance, as a string player, certainly your early years are crucial, because of the nature of what you're doing. This is not the most natural position for the human body, So I think an early start is pretty important. And I'm going to guess that my colleagues, as well as my colleagues in all the orchestras, I was going to say in the country, but probably in the world, depend on an early start, so that that position in this training is something that is just completely second nature, and very difficult to start late.
I worked at a station in public media that had classical music FM, and there was always an interesting push-pull between short popular excerpts and longer pieces. And when I look at Tanglewood and the progression of classical music audiences, right? And you're a veteran. How has that changed over the years, and how has the orchestra responded in repertoire to the changes?
That's a very good question, and maybe slightly hard to answer. Of course, we have, as most orchestras, as far as I know, have an artistic administrator. We've been fortunate to have Tony Fogg for many years. I'm going to say maybe 30 years at this point, which certainly makes him a veteran of his responsibilities as well. But I think that every day when Tony wakes up, I think he's thinking about where the orchestra is going, what sort of repertory is going to be important for the orchestra, not only popular, but also important. And I think that he, as well as the other members of the management, and this includes the conducting staff, take very seriously. Of course, there's a bottom line that has to be addressed as well, but I think they take seriously the artistic motor of what the orchestra is trying to achieve. As far as the audience is concerned, it seems to me that the audience has been consistent, and I think a lot of the programs appeal to. Just thinking of film night that we just played, I think that what the orchestra throws out there appeals to both older patrons and younger folks as well, to try to secure the future of the orchestra.
Well, finally, then, for you personally, every afternoon or evening that you step up to play, joy, nervousness, thinking about the piece, what's going through your mind and your hands and your body in those moments?
Right. I wouldn't want to speak for everyone, but I will, in that I think that there's a bit of all of those things in all of us. There is a certain amount of concern as far as execution on stage, of course, and it doesn't get easier the older you get. Trust me on that. But there is a responsibility that you feel, and I think mostly you feel it to your colleagues. There's a responsibility to execute your responsibilities. So sometimes I'm more nervous in rehearsals than I am in concerts, because you want to bear your responsibility with your colleagues so that you're not dragging them down, and that's just sheer preparation, really, to make sure that you're ready to fire and that you're not embarrassing yourself. So, yeah, I would say, to answer that question really more succinctly, I would say that there's a combination of everything in there: joy, nervousness, sense of responsibility, all those things rolled into one.
Will Hudgins, thank you so much. Viewers, I hope you get a chance, whether it's at Tanglewood or whether it's in a jazz spot, you must hear Will play. And if you have already, I know that you enjoyed it. And if you haven't, make sure you do this year or next. And viewers, thank you. If you're already a subscriber to the Berkshire Eagle, we appreciate it. If you're not yet, please consider becoming one. That's how you get these sorts of conversations and keep local journalism alive and vibrant in this country. I'm Dalton Delan. I'll see you next time on Eagle Reels and in the pages of the Berkshire Eagle.